Anything goes.
Yeah, just explain your connection to comics and
Sure. Okay.
what keeps bringing you back to the story.
All right. So
No muzzy stuff.
no muzzy stuff. Do I have to say my name or introduce myself or anything? All right. Hi, my name is Fawad Siddiqui. I'm the second assistant to the assistant of the manager of the assistant at A&M Comic Books, and I've been coming here since college. I used to work here in college, and I still come. Do I look at the camera, or do I look at you, or do I look at who do I look at? I'm from an immigrant background. I'm Pakistani American. I was born and raised here in Hialeah, in a very Cuban part of town, and my family is immigrants from Pakistan and India before that. And as many of us know, comics have a certain appeal to outsiders and immigrants. Superman is like the ultimate immigrant, coming from Krypton, created by two Jewish kids who felt like outsiders in Cleveland. That dual identity aspect also is something that an immigrant kid goes through, because you're one person at home and you're one person at school, and you're caught between two cultures and two worlds. And the comics, less so now, but always were like adolescent male power fantasies for, you know, many times nerdy kids to like feel empowered and be inspired by. So I know that's the case for me, certainly. The question is, how did I get into comics, and how much do I like the story? Well, let me show you. So this here, this is a D section in the DC section. So this here is Detective Comics issue 602. This is the first comic book that I ever got in my life as a comic book. My dad got it for me from a gas station or something when I was 12 years old. And what happened then, the backstory is, this is from 1989, July. So Batman the movie had just come out with Michael Keaton, and my cousin from England was visiting our house, and he had these big British comic books, and he had these Batman comics. He wouldn't let me touch them. So I knew Batman from like the 1960s TV show or whatever, like any kid, like cartoons. But he just wouldn't let me touch the comics. So he went, and then we went with him, and we saw, my family, we saw the movie. And, you know, so that blew me away. Like, there was a big craze back then. You guys won't remember, but in 89, 90, there was like Batmania all over the country.
The man with the pointy ears and the black rubber suit drew a crowd of at least 8,000 in Los Angeles last night as Batman the movie finally premiered.
The party was supposed to be held here on the streets of Westwood with elaborate plans to recreate Gotham City. But Warner Brothers got nervous about security and decided to donate the money to charity instead.
That was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And my man Jack was great. I loved it. I thought it was great. Nicholson was just incredible.
It was perfect. Hey, I've been reading comic books since I was 6 years old. They couldn't have done this movie any better.
You know, my dad got me these comics. Back then you can get them at like a truck stop or an Eckerd Drugs or whatever. And so this issue was the first one. I still cherish it to this day. We had one or two comics in the house before then. We had like a, what did we have? We're going to just take a trip down memory lane of my comic books that I had. Okay, they're in the Marvel section. Come over here for a second. So we also had this one in my house before the Detective Comics that my dad brought home in '89. This probably came with a toy or something. This was a Transformers comic where a version of Bruce Springsteen is doing a rock concert, and the Autobots have to defend him from the Decepticons trying to destroy him as he sings a version of Born in the USA. So for a little Pakistani kid, you know, I had this one. I had like some G.I. Joe, because comics were connected to cartoons back then. So, oh, sorry. So I remember then my dad got me, he noticed like, oh, he likes these comic books. It shuts him up. He stops crying or whatever. So, he got me these sets. So instantly I had a collection, like boom, I had like 60 comic books, you know, or 90 comics, because you get these packs of like 30 for $10. This is another one. This is the first Superman I ever owned. As you can see, Jimmy Olsen has been turned into a giant sphinx-like statue. And Superman's like, oh, Jimmy. It's pretty cool. So, yeah, then I would get the comics. I would, like, arrange them under my bed. We had some bed, for some reason, had, like, a pull-away bed that was missing. So, it's like a little cave that you can go in there. And I look at these comics, spread them out. The art's very, it was amazing, engaging. And I started collecting them then. And there was a few shops. We were in Hialeah, in Miami, and there was a few comic shops that I found There was one old comic shop back then. It's no longer in business, with like a grumpy old guy behind the counter. And I came in scared because the comic shops were like scary places back then. And this guy Charlie used to run it. And he said something intimidating to me, and I didn't come back to the shop for a while. And then there was another shop that opened up. You'd hear about it in school, you know, like, oh, there's a new comic shop somewhere over there. So I would go on a bike. I would sneak away from my family on a bike and drive across 103rd Street under the overpass and go to Fresh Comics in the warehouses, like in Hialeah Gardens. And it was a warehouse door open. You'd come in, there'd be all his comics and like a video game machine. So I started getting them in the 90s, and there was like, now I know all this comic book history. You know, I didn't know it back then, but the 90s were a crazy time for comics because 89, 90, 91, there was, partly because of the Batman movie coming out, it got a lot of coverage that, oh, Batman #1 selling for like $1 million or millions of dollars. I think Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill had bought back then the first appearance of Batman. It was like a big news story. So there was this collector boom, like this speculation thing where people were buying comics and thinking they're going to make millions of dollars with it, which all ended up being a bust later. Let's see if we can find the death of Superman. It was supposedly going to make us all $1 billion. Superman number 75. Ah, the death. He dies. They just made this into a movie. Interestingly, this was in the Man of Steel movie. Or no, Batman vs. Superman. They actually like recreated this. I remember this, I had this comic and a friend of my sister's ripped it up. And I came home and I found my black bag ripped right across the ass. I was like, no! Little 13-year-old. They brought him back within a year, but still. So it was this big boom. And everybody in junior high school was reading comics then. It was like crazy. It had a resurgence. Because in the 50s and 60s, all the kids read comics. That was the only entertainment they had, you know. And there were no comic shops. You just get them from the grocery supermarket or the drugstore, like spinner racks. But in the 90s, you had this crazy boom. So suddenly, again, you had like kids, maybe for the first time, lined up around the block to get these comics, these #1s that were coming out with these gatefold covers or whatever. And shortly after the Image thing, DC did something. They did the Death of Superman, which was very famous. And Batman's back got broken. Comics had gotten darker and more extreme then. Started getting more intense, more violent, Sin City, you know, more adult-oriented. The artists and creators themselves started to mature. They started to get more expensive, so it's not necessarily a hobby for little kids anymore. And then the weird thing happened in recent times of the movie studios all buying up all of the properties. So if you look at today's comics, you have the new reality, which is all these comics, they almost don't even cover their own costs, but they serve as promotion and idea generation for others. Stan Lee. Good old Stan. I'm going through all the comics right now because he passed away. So yeah, I mean, comics are still a fun, I'd say it's fun and as vibrant and creative as ever. There's been a lot of talk of it dying as a medium, but they've been saying that for like 20, 30 years. It hasn't really gone anywhere. It's changed, and it keeps changing and evolving. But a person like me, I still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And there's camaraderie in a shop like this. You know, eventually you become part of a family with places like this. You know, we've come in here, there'll be different events. He's called me in here to dress up in costumes and stuff. Once Good Morning America came. Like, the thing about A&M is now, this is like a landmark, you know, in Miami. This is the shop. The classic, epitomal comic book shop. You know, when you think of comic book store, you think of like this kind of place. This much stuff. A little bit of clutter, but a ton of selection. And anything you can imagine, it's connected to the history on the shelves. You have all this stuff from the 1900s, 1800s. You have layers and layers of back issues. So if you're a serious collector, or if you're looking for a gift or something, you know, there's a mountain of statues and stuff. So you get to really touch and feel the history of the medium, which is super fun. You can get lost in here and just find ancient stuff. You don't know what you're going to find. You might find like an old Twilight Zone miniseries. Or An ancient issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something by Winsor McCay from the 1900s. It's an antique store as well, so you get a lot of ancient stuff. That's the fun of a place like this. You just flip through the back issues and you don't know what you're going to see, and you're just surrounded by really amazing art and other similar people that are kind of nice and nostalgic and literate. So you get a lot of nerdy conversations, but intelligent conversations. And
Here for Life magazine number
oh
one.
yeah, Life magazine #1, dude. 1936, Life magazine, issue 1. So you really get to walk through the past. What do we got here?
Newspaper.
This newspaper's from 1888. Yep. This is the Farm Fireside, volume 9, number 8. Current comment. This is the time of the year when the traveling tree agent is around among the farmers, grandiloquently talking tree, from the fibrous root up to the rosy fruit, alkali specimens of which he usually carries with him in magnifying jars.
And this is an album with the art created by Joseph Albers.
Okay, and we got some old Joseph Albers. No, that's not gonna. I don't think the kids are ready for this, George.